This is an oral history interview with Dr. Sheldon Cook. The interviewer is Ryan McKinley. The date is May 16th, 2014. The time is 10 o'clock a.m., and we are in his home in Lafayette, California. Also present are his son, Jeff, and his daughter-in-law, Annie. Just some starting questions. When were you born?
August 16th, 1923.
Okay. And where were you born?
San Jose, California.
Okay. And what was your father's name?
Enos Paul Cook.
What did he do for?
He was a doctor. He was a pediatrician in San Jose.
Do you know when he came to? Was he born in California or was he immigrant?
Yes, he was born in Oakland.
Okay. He was born in Oakland. And what was your mother's name?
Ruth Esther Cornell.
What did she do at that time?
She went to school and college and was very interested in music and the piano particularly. And she went to Berkeley and then also San Jose State in the music department. And did a lot of original stuff, and then 2 piano stuff with a good friend of hers by the name of Eleanor something or other. Eleanor, can't remember.
Okay. And do you know how your parents met?
It was through a cousin of my mother's, and it was in World War I time. And Dad was he was an MD in the Navy and had just been on a cruise after the war on the White Fleet that went around the world on sort of a goodwill thing. And they went back to Washington with her cousin and met my dad and the cousin's husband also that were on the ship. And then Mother and Dad were married back there. Okay. After she fell down and got a black eye and had to wear a veil with a great big black butterfly over her bad eye, her black eye. That was one of the stories of the time. So then both of them were from out here, but the White Fleet, which did this goodwill cruise around the world at the end of World War I, finally stopped in Washington, and my dad got off, and then then he resigned from the Navy, active duty, stayed in the reserves, and then they came back out here.
Are you an only child? Do you have siblings?
I have a sister.
Okay.
Who is gone, Carolyn. She was 2 years my senior.
Oh. Your parents were living in San Jose when you were born? Or
yes.
Okay. Growing up, did you spend a lot of time in San Jose when you were growing up, or did you move somewhere else quickly?
Yes. Well, moved to... I came up to UC Berkeley as a freshman and pretty much around Berkeley for the next several years. And then my mother and dad were divorced, and she came up to Berkeley because she had a lot of friends in Berkeley and relatives. And then I was living in a fraternity house, but I'd see her pretty regularly, and she had a lot of friends connected with music up here in Berkeley in this area. So she was very active in piano work up here too. Okay. And then I finished UC and then went into V12 and then ultimately got around to medical school after going through couple of years in V12 and working here and there as a naval officer, as just a JG in the medical corps. Well, that was really later after medical school. Anyway, she was here and doing a lot of music work here, and I think that brings it around the time that I left to go to medical school, and that was in Philadelphia. And just before that, I got married, and then my wife Marilyn and I went back to Philadelphia for medical school. Before I was through, we had a child, Jeff's older sister, and which lived in a suitcase for a while back there while I was going through medical school with very little funds, and then finished back in Philadelphia and had a residency, had my internship back there, and then came out here for a residency in pediatrics. And then while I was a resident, I was on duty out at in the Navy Reserve, and I was kind of bounced around in various duties. The last of which was down at Moffett Field as a flight surgeon. I was not a flight surgeon, but by label I was a flight surgeon. And so then I was going down to Moffett Field and taking care of some of these pilots. And one day I had the opportunity to go flying with one of them in his P-36, or no, that was not the Navy designation of their jet, but it was one of the jets that took off from catapults and such. Well, nevertheless, that was quite an experience. Then finished with the Navy a tour, and then finished my residency in pediatrics at UC in San Francisco and Children's Hospital in Oakland. Then came, and as I say, we had one child, our eldest, and then Jeff came along. I don't quite know how, but he came along. He's here. Had to put up with him, and so then I started, finished the residency, and then looked around for a place to live. And Marilyn, my wife, had some family here, and my family was there. Some was in San Jose, but some was up in Berkeley here also. So, and I finished my residency, so started looking for a place to, as I say, practice, and came out here to Lafayette, and I don't think we looked much further. I had some friends that were practicing nearby, and so that got started and stopped when I finally retired. About, when did I retire?
81.
81. He's my brains.
For some things.
The date man.
Yeah. And then we came out and had a little house on the other side of town where we had 3 children and 2 bedrooms, as I recall. And all 3 of you were in that back bedroom, I think.
Mm-hmm. Before Lily was born.
On Thompson Road, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then started practicing, and I had the good fortune, not my patients, but in town to be around when there was I won't say an epidemic of measles, but there was quite a bit of measles around. And so I would make a lot of house calls, and I'd make there were a lot of housing developments going on out in that part of town, and I had a little Volkswagen Bug, and I'd go out there to make one house call, park the car, and people knew that was my car because it was a kind of a unusual thing. And so I'd make one house call, and then this was quite a crowded housing development, and then one of the neighbors would see my car, and they'd recognize that I was in the neighborhood, and so they'd call the owner of the house where I was making a house call and say, "Would you have Dr. Cook come by after he leaves your house?" Well, that happened. I can remember on more than one instance where I'd park once and make 4 or 5 house calls. There was quite an epidemic going on, and there was another couple of doctors in town, but their practices were settled in little different areas. But I was available to go almost anywhere. So that was starting of practicing in Lafayette, which was a great experience. So that doesn't quite bring us to the present, but almost practiced here for a number of years and retired and went sailing for a while. Mm-hmm. We'd done some sailing before then, and so finally got a nice sailboat, and so we went cruising for about 4 years.
Okay.
And then, what else has happened? Do our summers up at a place in the Sierra that my family built years and years ago, which we all have enjoyed tremendously, on a little lake and cabin up there that my dad built. He helped build, and it's still there, much alive and well, and still a favorite of, not a favorite, but I don't know if it's a favorite or not with our offspring. We have several. We have 4 kids, and just next to the oldest, Casey is our oldest, and she's been interested in the cultures in India, and she's been over there for how many years?
Probably 30 years.
32.
Yeah,
morning.
she comes back and forth periodically, and came back here when Marilyn was sick, and then stayed around for quite a while getting me kind of organized, and then she went back to India to sort of see how things were there, because she'd been here about a year, helping with my wife and then with me, and she's there now and planning to come back. And then in the meantime, the rest of the family have generously come in and helped the old man tie his shoes and things like that.
Not that bad. Not that bad.
And so that's about where we are now, and enjoying the gracious generosity of these kids.
You want to name your other two
Unbelievable.
kids?
What?
You want to name your other two kids?
Oh, there's
You
a
kind of named later.
Casey and Jeff, and then there's Elizabeth and Sarah and Elizabeth. And Sarah lives in Albuquerque and is very involved with horses, and her husband and their beautiful house in Albuquerque. And then Elizabeth is the youngest. She lives in Oakland, and she and her partner have a child apiece, and Jeff and Annie have two wonderful children. What segments have I?
If I could take you back a little bit to when you were growing up in San Jose, do you remember what it was like when you were a child and elementary school and things like that?
Yeah, we lived not far from the elementary school. We lived with my grandfather, 201 South 8th Street, and valuable things that you tuck away for no reason at all. And my dad was practicing and was getting started, and my sister and myself and my mother and father lived with my grandfather, which was mother's father. And he was a great golfer, and he also was just sort of winding down a business as a furrier in San Jose. And then I went to a local, went through the M.R. Trace grade school and Herbert Hoover Junior High School, and then I went to a local, a nearby high school, a Catholic Jesuit high school, Bellarmine College Preparatory, and went through there, and then graduated, and then went up to Berkeley, and spent some time in Berkeley in college, and then let's see, Berkeley, and did I get into, was I in B12 then? I think so. Then was called into active duty. Then had a few tours here and there in the Philippines, and where else was I? Back east. Anyway, mainly on shore stations. And I came back and I guess started the practice, I guess, after the war, yeah.
What year about did you graduate high school?
Well, let's see, it must have been 1940. Is that right?
Seems right.
Because I think you graduated a year early.
Bellarmine.
I remember, didn't you graduate? You were 17 when you graduated, I
I
think.
think so, yeah.
So that would be about, right, it'd be about 1940.
40, yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if you could take me through kind of things you remember doing in elementary or middle or high school, people you really remember, or if you remember playing cowboys and Indians on the street or something like that.
Let's see. I got interested in photography and had a little dark room in our basement on University Avenue. That was when I was in high school. Loved to roller skate. Loved to roller skate. And we used to play hockey in the street, as a matter of fact, on roller skates. And then I got interested in photography and set up a little dark room in the basement of our house there. Bicycling and paper route and horsing around for a while. I did ride horses. My dad had a couple of horses, and so horseback riding was a rather significant part in that high school, grammar school, high school range. And then also my dad had a friend who had a power boat, Marshall Hall. And my dad and I both got interested in boating. And power boating. And as time went on, I became more and more interested in sailboating. And that sort of took off on a tack later on. Let's see. San Jose. I played a little tennis in San Jose. And horseback riding, tennis, and bicycling. Lots of bicycling. I had a paper route where you'd go down to the train station in the afternoon, and the train from Oakland would come by the San Jose station and push bags of stacked newspapers off. And I had one of those, or two of those, and the train wouldn't stop. They just push them off like that. So then you'd get them by the side of the track and then go over and box them. You undo the wire that was holding them, and then you'd box them. Do you know about boxing a newspaper?
No.
Because you'd have to pack them up and then put them on your back and ride your bicycle around your route and then throw them as you were going. I remember. Pretty much.
I'd like to see you do that with a Sunday paper.
Didn't do the Sunday paper. But it was, and then you grab them at this end so it wouldn't fly out when you threw them. You threw them this way so they'd land and then scoot on the sidewalk up to their front door, hopefully. and not in the middle of their rose garden or anything like that. So that's a boxed paper. So you'd get about 100 of them, and you'd sit there in the train station and box them, and put them in these bags that were on either side. Get on your bicycle and do your thing, and most of it was on bicycle and in the evening, and about half of it was in the rain. That was now that was just another interlude in life in San Jose, California.
So you would fold the entire paper into a little square like that? And
Well, the papers were a little thicker than that,
oh, okay.
but that would let you throw them. And then they would spin and land and then slide on their on their little sidewalk from their front porch and you'd try not to get it in the middle of their hedge or their middle of their rose bush, and sometimes you'd feel compelled to dig it out of some lousy spot and put it on their front porch. And then once a month or twice a month you'd go around and collect from these people for the cost of the paper, and then give it back to people who also were giving you the papers.
Okay.
So that was the one of the little aspects of growing up in San Jose. When I started playing the cello in San Jose, I was okay. I enjoyed it, but sort of wanted to play the trumpet. And I tried, and that didn't work out very well. A little easier to carry than a cello.
Yeah.
San Jose, then high school, Bellarmine College. It was just a few blocks from our house. I don't happen to be a Catholic, but it was a Jesuit school, and the high school in town was okay, but my parents thought that the private school just a few blocks away from where we were would be more suitable for kind of if I was interested in medicine later on, it might have some bearing. Pretty boring, isn't it, Chad?
Not at all. No, I'm going to get some coffee.
So, let's see, Boy Scouts. I joined the Boy Scouts when I was at San Jose.
What was the name of the newspaper that you worked for?
Well, it was either the Mercury Herald. I think it was the Mercury Herald. It was printed in Oakland, and then came down on the train, and the bags were shoved. But then I'd collect. As I remember, it was the Oakland Tribune that I was delivering here, because there wasn't San Jose Evening News was not much of a just had local stuff, and so a lot of people had a paper that was made or from another city. The San Jose Evening News was just getting going.
Did you learn how to drive when you were in high school? Did you learn how to drive a car when you were in high school?
Well, I had a Chevrolet coupe that was quite old, and it was, I can remember I cut the top of it out so that I could go down the street and throw my papers. And So that I had for a while until Frankie Ricocha, God bless him, was out helping me start the Chevrolet, and it backfired, and the crank came around and broke his arm. So that...
You mean like one of those?
It was a front crank. And then if you couldn't hold on to the crank, you should just have it laying and use it but to pull up, not to push down, because if it backfired, it would jump out of your hand. But if it if you held it too hard, then you'd be in the process of hanging onto it, and it would pull it. So if when it backfired, you couldn't hold on to it. It would pull out like that and come around and break your arm. And which it did with Frankie Ricocha. And so that was another little incident. But it was a common fracture. And so we took care of that. Dad helped take care of that. Another little incident. I don't recall that often, but when you start to plumb the memory bin, didn't mention at all, and that was a very important part of my life, was my sister, older by 2 years, and we were very good friends, and she, various things, know other people and introductions and so forth, and from the social standpoint, and then she was just a good sport. She wasn't very good roller skating, though, I will say. That was, she didn't do that well. Roller skating was a big part of it. We used to play hockey with roller skates on the street in front of our house on University Avenue. The only problem with that was that it was one of those concrete streets that where the concrete would crack, and they'd tar those cracks. Mm-hmm. So, and they weren't every place, but I mean they were not just one on top of the other, but they were, little veins that would go through this concrete. And if you were if you're playing out there on a hot day, well, you'd want to stay off of them because they were sticky. The tar was sticky. And on the cold days, if you hit them with your skate while you're skating, it'd slip out from under you. But other than that, it's a fairly good surface for hockey and roller skating. I liked to roller skate. It was fun. Enjoyed it. But Carolyn, my sister, was a very important person in growing up. She was a wonderful patient and a good buddy. She died about 4 years ago, I guess. Up in Reading, lived up in Reading. And family, married this nice guy, and he was an attorney up there. That was just another little sidelight that when you start to think of things, or you start to think of a lot of things that are non sequitur, sort of snatches here and there.
I wanted to ask, when you originally came to Lafayette, was that a decision you made, or did somebody send you here to come to Lafayette? Or
I don't know how to answer that exactly. There wasn't a specific thing that I can recall, other than the fact that I wanted to practice. I was a resident at Children's Hospital in Oakland, and I wanted to be within that range. And in looking around, there wasn't any one thing that drew me to Lafayette, other than the fact that it was close enough to Children's Hospital. It was an attractive community, and it wasn't that developed at that time. Well, it isn't that much more. Well, it's a lot more developed now. But anyway, it was attractive. My wife liked it. I think she had some friends here. Yeah, Moffats. Yeah, the Moffats. But I can't recall any one entity that brought us to Lafayette specifically. We just looked around Orinda and or staying in Oakland or in Berkeley, and then I had an opportunity. There were a couple of doctors, there were a lot of pediatricians, but some that you became better acquainted with than others. And this one fellow, Hub Long, had a lot of patients out here, families out here. He practiced in Berkeley, and he said, "Gee, I don't like to go out there and make house calls." He said, "If you go into Lafayette, why, I can send you a bunch of patients." He had one of the good practices, and then Larry Gleason in Oakland. I'd take calls for them once in a while, and so they were very encouraging to go someplace locally, and they started to talk about Orinda and Lafayette and Walnut Creek and so forth. And I think that was one of the influences. I don't know if that was one of the main influences. Maybe it was. The fact that they had more or less said that they didn't want to come out here to make house calls themselves, and they would, but they said, well, you get quite a rapport with these private doctors when you were working as a resident there at Children's. And so it seemed that this was I looked at it and so forth, and it just seemed like a very, very good thought. So I think that was as important an influence as anything else. We didn't have any relatives out here. I can't think of any other impetus, any other big force that got us out here, other than just the fact that I'd have a pretty good start out here with the referrals from these doctors in town who didn't want to come out this way to make house calls.
What do you remember about Lafayette when you came here? Like, talking to your son, he was saying Mount Diablo Boulevard, you have a completely different view of that when you came here and where your practice was and things like that.
Yeah. It was a very it had a town with a very small town atmosphere. The fellow who owned the drug, that wasn't the only drugstore in town, but Bill Eames, for instance, he was just getting started, there were a couple of other drugstores in town, but Bill was one of the people that if I was out on a house call at night and I needed something that I didn't have with me, I could call Bill and he would say, I'll meet you down at the drugstore, and whether it was 10:30 or 11 or something like that at night, and I could pick up what I needed from him. So for many, many years, I esteem we're still friends, but I just felt a very, not only Bill, but I mean, there were a couple of other drugstores in town also, but Bill seemed to be the one that would drop anything and take care of the situation at hand, because there was usually a kind of an urgent thing, and I'd be out at 11 or 12 at night and at this house call and call Bill, and he'd be down there and help take care of things. So he to this day is a nice connection and memory of the early days in Lafayette, and Ted, and there was Murphy's Pharmacy. They were a nice bunch. Various grocery stores and little here and there that you know.
King's Food Center.
Right. And Jim Sherry's clothing store. Jim and I were very good friends. He died about a couple of months ago. I think he was 102. But I'd get clothes from, he had a men's store in town, and neat guy. He was quite a skier. He had a son that was quite a skier. And so that was another connection. And the people that, what's the hardware store on the right going into town?
Diamond K.
Diamond K. That family. His mother and Marilyn were good friends. My wife and mother of the proprietor at Diamond K Hardware. Then the people that started Orchard Nursery were friends of. Marilyn had lived in the vicinity in Oakland and Berkeley all of her life, Oakland and Berkeley. So she had a lot of friends that migrated out this way, and so she knew. I guess that was another reason that not a reason to settle out here, but the fact that there were people that she was acquainted with and enjoyed. I don't know if I don't even remember what your question was.
I was just businesses and people you remember from when you just came here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, as I say, mainly my wife's friends, because I was not here in the earlier years in Lafayette, and at Berkeley I saw Lafayette on the map, but I didn't think much about it.
There's your buddy Joe Campana.
Joe Campana, right. Wonderful friends. So I don't know what other things drew us here. I think Marilyn's acquaintances were as much an influence as anything else.
When did you start your practice in Lafayette? What year was that?
I think it was 52. I think it was 1952, maybe 53, but I'm going to say 52 is when you took your oath there downtown, because we were 3 when I moved here. I was 3 when we moved here.
There's a generation or so. It's a little foggy, but that's...
Yeah. I remember my third birthday. Let me put another. I remember my third birthday here on Thompson Road.
Thompson Road.
Yeah, and so I would say you started practice probably at 52 to 81.
52, some
52
ways kind of sticks in my head.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah. Who was the guy that had that gas station there in Dewing?
Oh.
Your favorite gas station? Was it Sutton or something like that? It's, Jim?
Jim Sutton.
Jim Sutton?
On this side, the Shell station.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I burned up a lot of gasoline in those days. Well, every morning in and out to the hospital, and then house calls here and there and so forth.
Well, the freeway wasn't there yet, was it?
No. No, they just built other board of the tunnel, and yeah, it was hard for the VW to get up the hill there in high gear. Oh, and I forget going in there with a guy, the child that had croup. And I didn't know if he was... I picked him up and put him in the car and drove in to call Children's and said, I need maybe a tracheotomy for this child. So they had it all set up, which he needed and had. But the Volkswagen going upwind, wind you had to depend upon. And it would slow you down getting up into the tunnel. And there was this kid, I put him in my car and drove him in because his parents were a little shaken. And so I drove him into Children's and called, the ENT guy, greatest guy, not Jerry. I can't think of his name. Great guy, but I called him and he said, I'll meet you there. So he met me there and he had a tracheotomy just like that. And lived, fortunately. Anyway, that's a sideline story. But yeah, so that would have been 52, 53 in that range. And let's see, rented that place.
Was Thompson Road your first house?
Oh, the Thompson, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, you rented what
that
place,
was,
the
I
office?
was thinking of the office. Thompson Road was our first house. When the junction of Thompson Road and the Glen Road went up, and there was a creek that came down and was a big hole there, but the creek must have been 20 feet below grade level. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And
I filled that in.
But while we were there, they eventually filled it in, and Glen Road became very popular, and not much that went over to Upper Happy Valley went by the who had the other donkey? The Lucille Tulloch.
Oh,
Tullocks. That road was hardly passable. It went right by, but over to Upper Happy Valley. Let's see, I've lost the thread. What was I talking about?
That was an interesting sidebar. How did we get our donkey?
I think that was one of your mother's brainstorms that didn't always turn out successfully, but this one certainly did. And we got a sulky for it, and there's a picture right behind Jeff, as a matter of fact. Wasn't a donkey, it was a burro.
Burro, yeah.
I like that burro rather than donkey.
Yeah.
Didn't it? I thought it had something to do with the poker game. No?
Death Valley. Party. Alcohol. Burro. That's the second one. First one was the goat. Party. Alcohol. Goat. Next day delivery, too. Goat. Remember?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We headed up in one of those chicken coop areas behind us on what was the name of that road?
Nordstrom?
On Thompson.
Thompson Road.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
It's nice to have them around with their young brains
Yeah.
and good memories.
Well, there's a story you've told me before about Thompson Road and about your neighbor, the winemaker.
Oh, yeah.
I like that story.
That's a good story.
If you don't mind.
The Rosso family, Italians, one of their boys played football for Berkeley, very good, Ray Rosso. And then they had another son, Jimmy Rosso.
Jimmy and David Rosso, were they raised?
David.
Jimmy was our age.
Well, Ray was the football player at Berkeley. He was a well-known Rosso. I think it was Ray Rosso, yeah. But they lived immediately next door to us.
It was his father, right? Batista? Was Batista...
Bob?
Yeah, was he Ray Rosso's father?
Yes.
Okay. So
Yes.
it was like
Yes.
Ray, Batista, and us.
Yeah. There was much of Happy Valley was inhabited by Italians, and there were a lot of vineyards there. And so it was a lot of these guys were making a lot of wine there. Mm-hmm. And so Bob Rosso, next to me, he didn't have a vineyard, but he knew how to make wine. And he would collect, all of his friends would come over. He was a very neat guy. And then his wife, Rita, was just one of these big Italian women that never knew how to say a crossword to anybody. And it just was one of those providers for her husband in every way, shape, and form. And just the nicest person, living right next door to us. And Marilyn, my wife, is very outgoing and friendly, and she and Rita became immediate friends. Marilyn was interested in lots of things, but she was very interested in domestic things, and she did a lot of domestic. She did a lot of sewing. A lot of sort of humble domestic things that wives, maybe not as much now as a generation or so ago did. And she loved them and did them very well. And knitting and crocheting and painting and bird watch. I don't know, one thing after another.
Gardening, too. Yeah.
What?
Gardening.
Oh, and yeah, loved her garden.
With your story of Batista down in the winemaking?
Oh, yeah. All of his buddies down the valley, are making wine and this and that. And they were only allowed personally to make, I think, 100 gallons or so much just for their own personal consumption before it was taxed. I don't think that was the quantity. I think it must have been a little more than that. Anyway, Bob would make his wine, and he had a small vineyard in the back of his place, right next door to ours. And we didn't have a vineyard, but his place. And then the crop would come in, and he'd pick it, and we'd help him, and so forth and so on. And then he'd do the winemaking, all local stuff right there, as did all of his buddies up and down the lane. And I don't know if I mentioned, but you could only make so much for your own personal consumption before it was going to be taxed. And so before the tax man came, why, these people that were making more wine than they could do without being taxed had a problem as to what to do with this excess wine that they had. And so Bob would, every time of the year, Bob would come over to our house, and here was this guy. He'd have a transparent green plastic hose over his shoulder, kinked there, and the rest of the plastic hose you could see was red. And so he would be kicking a little barrel along, and he'd come along over at our garage, and he said, "It's okay in here?" And I said, "Yeah, it's okay in there." So he'd put his barrel in there, and then you'd hear this gusher of red stuff come in and fill up this barrel in our yard, and then that might be repeated 2 or 3 times, depending upon whether he had a bumper crop that he had to hide from the revenuers, and they'd have this. They'd telephone each other, and say, "He's coming here, and he's at George's house, and he's at Bill, so he's going to be there in a certain time to tax you on." But yeah, Happy Valley was just filled with vineyards and Italian families well before all of these $97 million houses over there now. Anyway, that was Lafayette then. And but Bob and Rita Rosso and their sons were a big part. And Marilyn, my wife, loved original things and historical things and things of that sort. So she'd learn recipes from Rita, and they'd go over and do some knitting or something like that. And Rita spoke English, and so did Bob, but broken English. They were not that far off the boat, but just the most generous and selfless people themselves. We just landed on our feet in the middle of these, and some other Italians on the other side that had the fish grotto down in town. And so we used to know of them too, not as closely as the Rosso family, but that was quite a part of our early introduction to Lafayette, and continued. Just love for the place and the people. Yeah.
How long did you stay on Thompson Road?
What?
How long did you stay on Thompson Road?
Oh.
I mean, all the kids started school there, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Let's see, Thompson Road. Then we went from Thompson Road to what am I talking
To
about?
Nordstrom?
What?
To Nordstrom?
Nordstrom Lane, yeah. And then got a house that was a big, big house. Nice house. But reasonable. Owned by a family named Nordstrom of the Nordstrom Valve Company. And all of the yard faucets were these huge valves that would keep, the kinds that would keep going. They were open this way and closed and open the other way. But they were what this fellow made, and they were very reliable valves. I'm kind of jumping around out of the Nordstrom house. That was quite a house in itself, quite a move. Then, let's see, going back, Lafayette was just really very small place with, and not that many, not that big a population. Now it's hard to tell what the place looked like originally, with all those good guys that were around. And the individual proprietors, that was part of they didn't have many employees in the various places. What else is around here? Oh, Beaver's Animal Hospital. That was an active place. We had always had dogs, and sometimes a cat or so around. And then a burro or a donkey. We didn't have too many of those, but they were. Oh, and the Tullocks had one too. Tullocks have lived here for as long a time as we have, I guess. And he's had an engineering company in Berkeley, Oakland. Let's see.
And a horse, too. Didn't Sarah keep a horse house?
Well, that was in Nordstrom Lane, yeah. And we had a horse.
Always animals, huh?
Yeah.
Always animals.
Well, I'll never forget, we had this house that was big acreage behind it where they'd graze horses. And we had a daughter that liked horses. And so we were in this upstairs. My wife and I were doing some work on painting or doing something in there. And we looked down, there were these horses over there. And we had one daughter that really was interested in horses. So she would, at any provocation, ride a horse. I mean, it was something walking down the street. Well, they grazed these horses over there. So my wife and I were upstairs. We could look down on this field, and there was Sarah out there trying to put a rope around this horse's neck. And she did, and she got on, and she rode it, and it was thrown off of it, and got right back on again. She was just indomitable as to their interest in horses. And so my wife and I looked at each other and we said, I think it's kind of inevitable that Sarah is going to want some horses sometimes. So we just bought this big house with some extra room there. So we built a corral and got a horse for Sarah. And well, I'm kind of wandering.
No. You had mentioned something, the fish grotto in Lafayette?
Yeah, Lafayette Fish Grotto.
What is that?
Grotto. Well, it was run by the Italian family on the other side of us, and the Panfillis, wasn't it? Yeah, Sonny Panfilli, who has a house, I guess, out beyond where the Malleys used to live, out a little farther on that road.
Right about opposite Dewing on Nashville Boulevard. Was it just about opposite Dewing?
Oh, on in town?
Yeah,
The Seafood Grotto.
Yeah.
Yeah. They had outdoor seats, and it was just a wonderful spot to get chowder or crab blowy or whatever. Just a wonderful place in town, and it was owned by the Panfillis, and they lived on the other side of us. There was a lot of Italian heritage around the town, and it was a wonderful kind of a feeling. Really, I don't know if it drew the community any closer together. I think it possibly did.
What was next to seafood? Is it Petars?
Next to where?
To Seafood Grotto? Was it Petars?
No, Petars was
Block or two away.
down. I mean, closer to where the seafood place is now in town, right where the Prappy Valley joins
Diablo.
not Diablo, thank you. On the right, that's always been an Italian restaurant in there, hasn't it?
Well, I was just thinking of other places along, a couple of places that came to mind along that, on the, I guess, would be the north side of the highway that have come and gone. But one is Shaps.
Right, yeah, Chaps, yeah.
That was a great spot. And Freddy's.
Freddy's Pizzeria.
And Petars. The original site of Petars.
Yeah.
It changed names a couple of times, then it moved over to where
the other side, yeah.
But it originally was in there. Yeah, and Freddy's. But Chaps was a real classic.
Yeah.
Hamburger joint.
Restaurant, yeah.
Drive-up hamburger joint. Preceded McDonald's. It was just a drive-up.
And what was the other... What was that earlier hardware store that was... that Ace or...
Well, there was Diamond K that McGrath's had.
Diamond K, yeah.
Another hardware store.
I guess it was Ace. Because Ace had that little one just where library is, or in that area. Remember Ace Hardware on that side? Just in town. Well, then they were also a little farther out too. Out beyond.
Don Young Ford.
What? Don Young, yeah.
Don Young
Wait,
Ford.
want to do something with him?
No.
Don Young, right.
Yeah.
Hey, Mick.
Wait,
No.
Was the movie theater here yet?
Oh, yeah.
And then, what would you do for recreation? For a night out or for family recreation? What would you do around?
We'd go to, we'd take the kids out for meals at Chaps or one of these other places where a lot of not serve yourself stuff, but some of them, things like the round table pizza or something like that in town, and but we didn't go out a lot. You didn't go out a lot. You didn't have that much money to kind of throw around at that point, anyway. Well, never, but yeah, and let's see, we were playing tennis then, and then boats, string of boats, not all at once, but.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, of course.
Dad, how about a little bit of the history of this house? When you got it, what it was like, why you bought this house?
Yeah. Well, we had this big house, and I won't say we'd outlived it, but I mean, we didn't need that size house anymore, and it was expensive, and so Marilyn knew a realtor gal here in town, and she said, I want a little house at the end of a lane that's covered with roses. Well, this gal was an old friend of hers, an old sorority friend at Berkeley, and knew Marilyn and her interests. And so this house was here, not the way it is now, but it was a much smaller house, and it had been built by the guy that was living in it. And his family helped him put it together. They lived in Berkeley, and this guy would get bussed from breaking up streets in Berkeley, hunks of concrete, and come out here, and he'd put this house together, mainly with bust, hunks of concrete that had been cracked up when they were tearing down a concrete structure. His name was Fisher, and so he just sort of hand put and figured the house out and put it together. There wasn't a chimney that we put in, and his main recreation area was the kitchen. He had a couch in there, and he'd entertain his friends. He had a little room down there, which is his bedroom, and he had one of those flexible gas pipes coming in with a little torch on the end of it. That was his heater. I mean, he had a great big old touring car, and he'd go down to the roundup and spend a good deal of time down at the roundup, doing whatever you do at the roundup. And then he'd
Do you know the roundup?
I've been to the roundup. Yeah.
weave his way home with his girlfriend, and they'd sometimes get in the ditch and sometimes not. The big ditch that goes down on that side. It used to be, was covered now, I guess, isn't it? It's not a open trench with running right down on that side of the lane.
Oh, between the two lanes.
Yeah. And he'd like to drink. Get down the roundup with his girlfriend, then they'd weave back here and stumble into this cottage that was really just, slightly askew. And they say he had a couch in the kitchen, which was his main entertaining area, and a chimney and a fireplace there that was built out of just old broken pieces of concrete. And then he loved to get a piece of wood and do something to it. Those are his original beams. And he would never just leave a piece of wood as is. He'd always do something. Mm-hmm. And it usually was quite artistic. But as I say, those were the original. We wanted to capture some of the original stuff because he was a character. And you didn't want to just push him aside and do your thing. I wanted to keep some of his things here. Fisher family, yeah. So that's, and we've done the redoing of it. And one of Jeff's friends was part of the working people that put it back together again. But there was just a little living room and the kitchen there, and this was a little kind of a porch and led into the backyard. Here was steps down here, and there was, I don't remember if there was much of a deck around. Yeah, there was a deck here. Yeah, I remember that. But it was very, very rudimentary.
And the dance floor.
And yeah, it was an amazing house. Very small. And so anyway, this realtor found this place, and it was about ready to fall down. And so we got it. Marilyn loved it, and everything about it. That little over on the lane, on the walkway, mm-hmm. the little gate there, mm-hmm. where that's his. We wanted to. There's so many picturesque things mm-hmm. from him that we wanted to maintain and have to a degree. And so Marilyn got her little cottage at the end of a lane covered with roses. We worked on it from there.
And that was about when? When did you go there?
Early 70s?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. I would say it would be right around 69, 70.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we were here in 71.
Yeah. Well, he had lived here.
Mm-hmm.
His family is from Berkeley, the Fishers, and the father had built a couple of houses out here for his kids, and there was another one over down the street, not still in the same block, that he built for one of his other kids, his daughter or something like that. Yeah, it's on the creek, right on the far side of the creek here. This creek that's right behind our place. So yeah, Chubby Fisher was the prior, the builder such as it was, and owner of this place. But his father would have these couple of places out here that he'd help his kids build for the hot summers.
So from Berkeley, this is where somebody would go out to the country?
Right. Through that rickety tunnel. Oh man, was that a rickety tunnel. Oh. You just crossed yourself once you got through it. We're happy. Yeah, that was his shop, and the other one we built, but this one is his. And I don't know if you can see the stained glass that he has up there. He just find things and find a place for something.
We heard that, I don't know, it was that one or the one that's in your room came out of the old ferry boats, San Francisco Bay ferry boat.
Yeah, that one did. Not that was there, but not this other one. This was they said it was from a ferry boat.
Mm.
Yeah, we kept some of the things that were reminiscent of his way of doing things. But have enjoyed it tremendously. And just, they say Marilyn loved it in the garden. She was a workaholic.
I had traded an email with, I can't remember, one of your daughters, and they said you were there for the opening of the Lafayette Reservoir, or you remember the opening of the Lafayette Reservoir?
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about that? The reservoir and it's coming to Lafayette.
Yeah. There was a very sort of a argument about whether they should put it up there or not, and the general public was, I'd say, more against it than for it. But I guess the water company and so forth prevailed eventually. And so then this thing just all of a sudden came into being. And then they started to fill it with water. And then it happened sort of out of sight from all of the rest of the people that lived here. And then all of a sudden, there was a reservoir there. And so it was all very private and so forth, and gates locked and such. And then as time went on, enough people expressed an interest to wanting to have access to it. And is it something that could be used by the population? And so eventually they said, okay, we'd have a little pier and places where you could rent a boat, and then I guess they had a couple of outhouses around, and then eventually they had a trail around the reservoir. And so it became a popular walking thing and so forth. And then as time went on, people had more and more interest in using the water from a recreational standpoint. So then various interests came in. And do you remember when Jim DeWitt had he was teaching? He had some boats. He had some El Toros, I guess. He'd bring them out, and give sailing lessons there here, and
Did you know that?
Sure, I wouldn't let you do that now up there.
yeah, oh my no. Well, you can rent a boat up there, and you
Yeah.
can fish up there.
They don't want you making skin contact with the water up there.
No, that's right. I mean, you can't jump in and
Yeah.
that. I don't think that was ever much of a use for it. Swimming in there.
I mean, even if you tipped over in a boat by accident, that would be. You can't even, when you pick a fish out of there, if you go fishing, you don't reach in for the fish. You net the fish and bring it on board. No skin contact with the water.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's good. I asked them about the radio control sailboat up there, and they seem to think that you might reach in and grab the boat. And that was
Oh, naughty boy.
pull it out by the mast.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
Well, as time went on, they used the water for rowboats and so forth, and you could bring a little El Toro in there too. So they started, I don't know who organized these boat get-togethers once or twice a year, sort of regattas, and there was eventually more interest in it, and so the municipal utility district got on board, which was they're the ones that had control of the water, and they got on board and made a little annual event of sailboat racing with the El Toros, and so this was the municipal utility district, and so this event was called the Mud Cup, MUD, Mud, Municipal Utility District Mud Cup. So then, those of us that were interested, why I had an El Toro and I was interested in sailing, and so we'd go up there these boat races. These races, El Toro races, and the municipal utility district put on, and I'd done some sailing in El Toros, and the other people that had El Toros hadn't done much sailing, so I won the race that year, and they gave it a year following, and I won that race too. And so they gave awards out for the race winner that were just glass mugs, and they were called the Mud Cup because it Municipal Utility District, MUD. So these were the trophies for winning these races, and I have two of them, but I don't know where they are. They were up there in Mom's place.
Oh.
They were just mugs, and I thought I had them. I was looking for them the other day, and they're gone. I think they're put away someplace. I think Mom put them away someplace. It'd be like her. She was quite a gal. Anyway, so that was one of the early instances up there. One of the other instances was that at one point there was a report of a predatory fish in there. You remember that?
Kind of.
It was
like a pike or something like that.
Well, I think it was somebody had put a good size fish, but I think it was a fish-eating fish too. I think it was a predatory.
Yeah.
And then there was one record at one point of the of some kind of a it was like an animal that was eating things in there. I can't remember the whole story, but there was some question of that somebody had put, I don't know, baby alligator or something like that in there.
Yeah, I think there was.
You remember something?
Yeah, I think there was an alligator story.
Yeah. But that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Oh, and then the slide. You remember the slide on the trail on the left side? Whole thing slid back down into the reservoir. That was before they really resurrected the trail, and it still wasn't paved or anything like that. But there was quite a slide over on this left side, just beyond where the stage is for the performances and so forth. But it's had a great history. It's provided a tremendous amount of a recreational facility and outlet for people. It's a fun place. We've had a lot of fun there ourselves with these boating things, but they're really gone now. But that was an era in Lafayette history. It's a great city. It's I think it's gotten a little out of control recently with all of this building going on. I guess it's all, senior housing? Is it more of that than anything else? Or I don't know how they're going to get that many seniors that quickly. We become seniors, but it'll take a little more time. It'll take a little more than 365 days.
Doesn't take much.
Yeah. But it's a neat city. Our kids. Well, you enjoyed growing up here, didn't you? And
oh yeah. I did. I'm not. It's a different city now than when I grew up here. I mean, it's a real different city. It's trying to find itself. But right now, I don't think it's trying to find itself. It was a rural community out here. I mean,
yeah, you'd know half the people walking down the street.
It was agricultural. It was livestock. It was, now it's trying to
Italian heritage. It was
traffic has just gotten off the charts bad. It's for a little one-horse town. I mean, it's, I don't know, heavy reliance on cars and not so much on other forms of transportation, which is kind of too bad.
Yeah.
I rode my bike around here a lot too. I actually had a paper route in the hills too, so we rode a lot. But now it's all cars. It's unbelievable cars. Choked with cars.
It is.
With cars.
It is. I mean, just driving through town on any part of the day, it just takes you 10 minutes sometimes to get through town.
Yeah. Really. Easier to get to Walnut Creek and go shopping in Walnut Creek than it is to go downtown.
Well, I think you're right, and certainly for some things.
We lived at Thompson Road. We lived a little bit closer to downtown.
Yeah.
Than here or at Nordstrom Lane. Nordstrom Lane, we were a ways away from the country.
Yeah.
From the city, so to speak.
Yeah, Thompson Road was quite.
That was pretty accessible.
Yeah. We lived right at the confluence of Thompson Road and Glen Road, and anyway, two school buses would come up to that triangular area, and empty, and they'd be filled at this one stop. Everybody from Glen Road would come down. I don't think the bus went up the lane at all. They'd all be brought down. All parents would have to run their kids down or something. But the two empty school buses would be filled right at that one stop, right at Glen Road and Thompson Road. Yeah, it was a great place. You know, I mean, acquaintances all up and down Glen Road and around on Thompson Road and so forth.
Pretty safe place.
Yeah.
When I was riding the other day, I went by the place where the Tullux Avenue meets Happy Valley Road, and that's where my Tribune box used to be.
Oh, where they drop your
big green Tribune box where they would drop the Oakland Tribune, and that was where I started my route. From there,
you went up Happy Valley.
I went up Glen Road.
Glen Road, yeah.
Glen Road, and then Monticello, went all the way up. And, in the wintertime, it was an evening paper route, and it would get dark early in the winter, and people would put their Christmas tree lights out on their outdoor Christmas trees, and everybody was using these big giant light bulbs. And so I would get to the first house, and it would be cold and dark, and I would unscrew a light bulb from one of the people's trees, and I would keep my hands warm. And then I'd get to the next house, and I'd unscrew a light bulb, and then I'd put the cold one back in. So I always had a warm light bulb with me throughout the whole route. And then I put the light bulb in the last light bulb in the first tree, and so everybody had all their lights, and I had warm hands for my evening paper route.
Oh my! Well, that was.
I remember the one thing I remember about opening up that Tribune box. That's why I raised it. Question was, it was Cuban Missile Crisis, and I remember it was knowing what that was all about. So that was.
Oh, the big headline.
That pictures
greeted you. Yeah,
of the vessels coming to Cuba, but it was that must have been 60. Well, when it was Cuban Missile Crisis, 62.
Something like that.
Something like that.
Kennedy.
Yeah, 60. It would be 61, 62 maybe.
Mm-hmm. Were people building bomb shelters and hoarding food? And...
A couple of people built bomb shelters. The Harders had a bomb shelter.
Yes, they did. Yeah.
And the house that Ann Julius lives in has a bomb shelter.
Well, now she's was that the house that the
She lives about 5 houses farther out Monticello towards the Keystons, right there at that cul-de-sac.
Is there any Keyston around still?
I don't know. But anyway, Ann and her husband live out there in that house.
It's on the left, isn't it? It's
yeah, because I think it was on my route. It's on the left as you go out, but you can see the vent from there.
The Pews had a house out.
Oh yeah, but I was thinking of the Harders had a backyard bomb shelter.
Yeah, right.
And then that house did too.
Right.
I remember going down into it. I mean, it was an honest goodness bomb shelter.
Full of canned food.
Yeah, it was like a sewer tank underground. It had beds and it had some food, and then it had a ladder. You'd go up through a tube about this big, and you went maybe 5 feet, and there was the ground, a lid.
Wow.
Yeah.
EC was quite
waiting for the big one.
That's a neat spot, and we've enjoyed it, and professionally and personally and socially and so forth, and raising kids and having a business here, so to speak, or practice here. But we've Really enjoyed it.
All right. Thank you so much for this.
Oh, not at all.
Interview ends at 12 p.m.